The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I always want to scream, who is that woman in the opener? Those are video shots that were taken on the very first day that we ever did the first show, which was like 8 years ago. And it's sort of like the presidency. I think this ages you. Looks like my daughter is the person in those videos. Hi. Anyway, welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. I'm your host for the next hour. We are coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the home for Autism Live. It is also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're thrilled to be here with you on this Thursday morning and excited to have this opportunity. We've got a big show for you today. I'm super excited. Traven, our fabulous Traven, is going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect with us here on the show. And while he does that, I want to remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go there, it's a big, beautiful site. We kind of like it. For years, we had a website that just sort of limped along, but now we have the faster, more fabulous, and more things to choose from. So don't be overwhelmed. Find the way that the website works best for you, that you can be watching the live show, you can chat with us, you can search topics either by dates or by the person who is the expert that's talking. Like we have a whole series of videos that are Temple Grandin, or we have the Ask Dr. Doreen's, and they're all segmented into playlists. You can find the whole recipe playlist, right? You can do any of those, or you can type in and say I'm looking for recipes, or you can type in and say I'm looking for potty training. Or you can go through by text the archive of what questions Dr. Doreen has answered by clicking on the topics tab at the top. And by the way, last year's toy guide is there. If you're looking for a gift to give to someone on the spectrum or to one of their parents, the toy guide from last year is there, and we're already working on the toy guide for this year. Which brings me to my next thing, that if you are on that website, you will see that within 7 or so seconds after you come onto the website, there's a pop-up that comes up that says, would you like to subscribe? And I want to be clear, because somebody wrote in and said, Shannon, I filled out the subscription thing because I want the viewer guide, because that's what you get when you subscribe. And they said, I have not yet been added to the viewer guide. So we will make sure that we have updated our list so that it's up to date, so that you can get your viewer guide. Because I know the people who get it kind of like it. Oh, that's who's going to be on the show this week. That's really one of the only things that we do from the viewer guide. But occasionally we will send you information about something else. And right now we're preparing a survey that we're going to be sending you guys so that you can write in some of the gifts that you think should be included in the guide, and give us some ideas of what toys in the past have been meaningful to you, what gifts have been meaningful to you, what's been helpful to you, what you see has been helpful to your child, or what your favorite toy was when you were a child. So we're going to be sending out a survey in the next week or so to the people who subscribe. But that's a very unusual thing. And you don't have to do the survey if you don't want to, but wouldn't you like to give some input into what we're putting in the toy guide? This is my favorite time of the year for so many reasons. I love that period of time right before the summer, right as we're moving into the fall. I love back to school because I love school supplies. I love to walk down aisles and see pens and Post-its, and it makes me happy. But it's also the time when it's the harvest, and things are a little bit slower this time of year. And people are just, it's like, oh, it's a new day, right? And I love a new day. So, I also love getting ready to gear up for the holidays. And we will be having many shows talking about the treadmill to the holidays. Here's what I have learned, and I know I'm digressing. Hadn't planned to talk about this, but when I was a kid, and even when I was in college and grad school, and I would come home, and my life was too busy to do too much other than go to the occasional Christmas party, right? Holiday party. But I would come home to my mother's house, and my mother would have the holidays like fully formed. It'd be like walking in a Macy's Herald Square. The house was decorated, the gifts were purchased, and they were wrapped within an inch of their lives. And it was just there were Christmas cookies in the freezer. Everything was done, and I thought that just like sort of happened. And then when I became the mom, and of course was dealing with autism, and I was like, I don't know how anybody gets this together. Like Thanksgiving would spring up, and I would be like, how did, you got to go to 14 grocery stores to get the 14 things that you need, and how do you do this? And my mother, before she died, I said to her, like, how did you just pull this out of your body every year? How did you make this happen? And she said, oh, the trick is not waiting until the holidays. That's why all those Christmas decorations are there now, because the women who are not stressed during the holidays took care of that now. It's August. It's time to buy, if you're celebrating Halloween, it's time to buy your child's Halloween costume now, order it online and have it delivered. And I'm learning how to do all of this. So we're going to talk more about that as the days tick on. But hey, I want to say to you, we have lots of experts that are on the show, and boy, have I got some experts for you today. But let's remember that I am not one of those experts. I am mom, a former teacher, I guess former teacher, always a teacher, and mom of an individual who was diagnosed with autism when he was 2.5. I'm trying not to use the phrase anymore that I'm an autism mom. I'm trying not to describe myself that way. But, and we can get into why about that. But I am the mom of an individual who was diagnosed with autism at 2.5. That's who I am. And I am committed to trying to help as many people get the help and support that they want, need, and deserve. So I count that as the whole autism community, the larger autism community, which of course is individuals who are on the spectrum. It is their parents, their boyfriends and girlfriends, husbands and wives, cousins, grandparents, right? All the people who are teachers to those individuals, and all the people who provide some sort of therapy or care, right? Anybody who loves somebody on the autism spectrum, to help you to get the help and support that you need, knowing that it is not one size fits all. That's what I'm committed to. And so I hope that you'll be here, but I am not an expert. That's what the whole point was, not an expert. But we do have experts on the show, and I like to refer to myself as someone with an informed opinion. And I'm very opinionated, and I'm pretty informed now of over 10 years of covering autism from a journalistic kind of, because this is sort of journalistic, I guess, point of view. I've gotten to interview a lot of experts, so I've heard a lot of stuff. So I have an informed opinion about some things, not about all things. All right, so that's who I am. But we love having you here. I usually mention by now that this show is meant to be interactive. So please feel free to write in, and Traven showed you the bunches of ways that you could do that. So we like to start every Thursday morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani are those experts talking about. So today, our jargon term, and we're sort of revisiting this a little bit. We've done it before. But since it's come up a lot in the last couple of weeks, we thought we should revisit it. So today's jargon term is DSM. What in the hey nani is that? So the actual definition for DSM, DSM stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, published by the American Psychiatric Association. Now, it's important to realize that the DSM comes out And it is available for the public to look at. But then a new edition will come out, right? And then a new edition or an amendment will be made. So right now we are functioning off the DSM-5. And that is an important distinction for the people who are in the autism community, because the 5 changed the definition of autism pretty much top to bottom. So anyway, let's take a look at what our working definition for those of us in the autism community. The DSM is the current resource for criteria for an autism diagnosis. Now, here's where we get into language, because notice that it's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And under autism now, there is something called the Autism Spectrum Disorder. And that is the criteria for being diagnosed with autism. In the DSM-5, there is no longer, the term Asperger syndrome is no longer being used. That we thought was going to be the bumpiest thing about the DSM-5, and we thought that people with Asperger's were going to be left out of treatment. In fact, and we had a couple of experts who came in who said, I don't think that that's going to be the case. In fact, one of them was Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and she said, I think that more people who have Asperger's are going to get funding for more treatment than ever have before, and that really has proved to be the case. But for those of you who have issues with calling it a disorder, this is why it is referred to as a disorder. And this is why we refer back to that, because it's the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, that is put out by the American Psychiatric Association, and we are working on the DSM-5. So if you want to know the actual criteria for getting an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, what you would do is Google DSM-5, and then you will be able to see that actual language, okay? So I think that's a pretty important thing to know. Moving on, we always have a question of the day. And our question for you today is, what makes you unique? What is it about you that's different than everyone else? And I don't know about you, but as a parent and as a teacher, I love to be around young people. I love to help them to discover the world, whether they're on the spectrum, not on the spectrum. I just think that young people are amazing. Now, that's not to say that I don't like people who are older as well. I do, because I love to hear their stories of what they've done, right? But I think one of the greatest gifts of being a parent is to help your child to fully accept themselves and to love themselves. I think that starts with loving them unconditionally for who they are. And sometimes that can be a little topsy-turvy when your child has been diagnosed with a disorder, right? Because you don't quite know, where does the child start and end and where does the disorder end? And it feels weird in the beginning to go, I'm going to fall in love with a disorder. But I think what happens to a lot of people on this journey is that in the beginning, for a parent, it's like your child is here and the disorder is here, right? And they are apart. And so you look at them in that way. And something that happens as your child gets older is that the two get closer together until they are enmeshed, because for your child, that is the truth. They are who they are. They don't know anything different. And you begin to see your child that way. And you can't imagine your child any other way than they are. So, and why am I bringing this up? Because I think it's so important. One of the greatest gifts we can give our children is the gift of accepting them for who they are. Please don't be mistaken. When we accept a child for who they are, we are not saying that you can't make strides at anything. this is for every child that's on the planet. You love the child when they are 3 and they cannot read, but you are not going to sit there and say, you're fine exactly the way you are, and I'm not going to attempt to teach you anything, so you won't read, right? That would be preposterous. But if we look at our children with autism and accept them for who they are and give them all the things that they need to do to grow and become who they were meant to be, right? Then we give them all the tools that they want, and we don't look at it and go, I'm trying to change you. We're just trying to give them the world. So what makes you unique? What makes your child unique? And if we can start really being mindful about telling our children, you know what's unique about you, and you know what's special about you, and you know what I love about you, I feel like that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give them. And that starts with knowing what's unique about you and loving yourself for who you are. I have a friend, and in fact, it is her birthday today, and she's a unique gal. She's a really unique gal, and there are things about her that other people have said, oh, well, you know, you're this or you're that or whatever. And I always love to say to her, yeah, and that's what's unique about you. That is why you are so fabulous. So if other people look at that and go, oh, I don't see that as a plus, well, you know, come over here because your friends are over here and we think that is a plus. And I think that we should all be treated to that and have friends like that in our lives, right? I know the people that I want to spend time with are the people who recognize that I am not like everybody else, nor am I going to be. My goodness, I couldn't be, right? So let's start with loving what's unique about us. And then when we can be that way with our friends, we should be, but most especially, we need to be this way with our children. So love thyself, right? Okay, let's move on to what our topic is this week. Our topic this week, if you remember, is this whole idea of good, better, best. And we see this throughout life, that there are things that, you're going to go to a store, you're going to buy a sweater, and, you go to JCPenney, or Jacques Penney, as my grandmother used to call it, and they've got the set of sweaters that are here, and those are good. But then if you want to pay a little bit more, they have the better sweater, and then over here they've got, well, this is the higher price, but it's the best sweater that it is. So our lives are full of this. And, sometimes we need to settle for good. And good is good, right? But I'm always looking for, how do we keep moving up the food chain? So when we talk about autism treatment, we want absolutely what is good for people who are on the autism spectrum. But if you can get the better, do. And if you can get the best, do. And part of why I wanted to talk about this is because we see so many families who didn't have to fight with anybody other than their insurance company to be able to get autism treatment. And we see those families who are not informed, who are like, well, I'm just going to take, I know you gave me a prescription for 35 hours, but I'm just going to take 15 because I want him to be a kid. I want to have time as a family. I want all perfectly reasonable reasons, right? I don't want to do, 35 hours. That's crazy for a 3-year-old, right? But then you are settling for, you had an opportunity to have what was best, and you are settling for not even good. And that offends me. I just have to be honest. That offends me. And it offends me because it's from a place of, I'm going to use a word, you're going to get offended, but ignorance. If you knew what was at stake, we just, tomorrow you are going to see Ilana Gershlovitz, who is an amazing mom. She's written a book called Saving My Sons. And one of the things that she says in her book is that when she had her first son and he was diagnosed with autism, she was afraid and didn't know what to do and had all these cautionary things. And so they weren't able to implement the best, right? And sometimes they couldn't even get in the good category, partially because of access, partially because of fear. Then she had her second son who was neurotypical. Then she had her third son who was diagnosed with autism at a very early age. And she says in her book, we already knew what was at stake. We knew if we don't do this, then this is what the outcome will be. And they made the decision to do everything for their third son, that the best was what it had to be, and they had access by that point. partially because they created it. But that child no longer has a diagnosis of autism and is going to lead a much different life than his older brother. So if you have been given the best, I want to make sure that you know it's the best and that you should take super advantage of it and not pull back and go full bore. Most of you have access in the United States because of insurance to have the best with your ABA program. Let's remember that at school, we don't talk about best, right? School is not responsible for best, but they're responsible for at least good. Supreme Court has said that. Can't be de minimis, can't give us the minimum, but school doesn't have to do best. So all the more important, if you have access to an insurance plan that will give you funding, even for a year, for the best, please take advantage of it. All right, we have got to move on because we've got a big show and two amazing guests for you. Hilary Cline, autism expert. She's a clinical manager designee who is going to be joining us in just a second to answer some of the questions that you guys have sent in. And then a little bit later on in the program, we have Julie Hornok, and what an amazing mom she is. From the United States in Autism, and can't wait to talk with her. United in Autism, and what a varied background she has, and we look forward to hearing everything that she says. In fact, I really want to talk to her. She says that she can define for us the 3 keys of the parents who become those on-it parents and are fighting for their kids to do the best, and the parents who go down the hallway of I'm bitter, disappointed, and disenfranchised. So, because wouldn't we choose to be down the hallway of getting stuff done and being positive rather than be down that, and we know people that are like that, right? That are like, woe is me, how could this have happened to me? It's a choice. It's a choice, but if you had the choice to be down the pathway of feeling better and getting better, I hope you would choose that. She's going to tell us what the 3 keys to that are. Okay, so let's take a break, and then we're going to be back with Hilary Cline, and we'll also be checking in on some of the things that you guys write in. Thanks. Stick with us.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bray.
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
Do you provide care services to someone with autism? Recently, more and more children are being diagnosed with the condition and getting the support they need as awareness grows. But what happens to these children as they grow up? It's estimated that over 500,000 youth with autism will turn 18 in the next decade, and they'll be faced with a very difficult reality. As children with autism grow up, their services start to disappear or become very difficult to access. Things like medical care, mental health counseling, vocational training, and more. All services that are still desperately needed. The loss of support that youth with autism face as they grow up is so severe that it's referred to in the autism community as falling off a cliff. Adults with autism need the same level of support they had as children to avoid falling off the services cliff. Introducing Skills Living, the web-based software designed specifically to help transitioning youth and adults with autism so they can avoid the cliff and instead fly to success. With Skills Living, help your learner with autism develop the skills they need in all the critical areas of adult life, including self-control, planning, and problem-solving, effective communication, performing life skill tasks for independent living, acquiring and maintaining employment or other meaningful activities, developing and maintaining social skills and relationships, accessing transportation and public services, and being safe. Skills Living includes a comprehensive assessment, a data collection mobile app, behavior intervention plan builder, and automatic progress reporting. It also provides a complete curriculum addressing 16 key areas spanning the entire range of functioning adulthood. Skills Living is easy to use and can be implemented by schools, parents, and autism service providers. Call or click today for your free demo and see how Skills Living can help your learner with autism avoid the cliff and instead reach their fullest potential. Skills Living. Wish, learn, become.
Welcome back, everyone. I want to say a couple of shout outs to some folks on Facebook. I want to say hi to Rosie. I want to say hi to Gamel. I want to say hi to Chris and to Beth. and to Michelle, and to Siam. What a beautiful name. And I also want to, Beth said, I definitely fell in love with this disorder. I was gifted with working with children and adults prior to the birth of my son. He is a strong 15-year-old autistic young man. I have put the growth of every child in him. I have always taught him to have his voice, and now he advocates for others with disabilities. I love my little superhero. Man, that gives me chills, just gotta say. Okay, and Rose, I see that you would like to talk more about stims and tics. Okay, we will talk a little bit more about that later on. But right now, and I want to say, we will get around to saying hi to everybody on YouTube as well. But right now, we are joined by Hilary Cline, and she is our autism expert for the day. Hilary, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me.
We're thrilled. So Hilary, tell us a little bit about what your job title is, what you do, and where you do it.
Sure. So I am the clinical lead manager at the Las Vegas location of CARD. So I oversee all the clinical programs here and support our team in providing the best ABA services we can.
Woohoo, Las Vegas. We know that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but we're going to have you tell us a little bit about it all the same. So we have some questions that you guys have written in that we're going to have Hilary answer. The first one comes to us from India. The question is, how do you all decide when to stop intensive ABA? I've heard Shannon say her son received 4 years with CARD. Does it mean he has learned all the skills from all the curricular areas of skills? And let me just say that in actuality, Jem did 5 years of intensive ABA with CARD, and they were using the skills curriculum, and that I'm going to let Hilary answer about, when do you stop, but my son had not learned everything in the skills curriculum, because guess what? I have not learned everything in the skills curriculum. That's how comprehensive skills is. But there's sort of a tipping point, a point which, I know a lot of the skills in skills, but I'm working on some of them. So having answered that part of it, Hilary, what do you say to when do we stop? When do we know, what are the indicators to stop intensive ABA?
So there's a lot of different factors that go into the recommendations that the BCBA will make for a comprehensive program or an intensive program. First, I just wanted to touch base on that terminology. When we're talking about intensive programs for ABA, we mean 25 to 40 hours a week, which is actually quite a large gap of 15 hours a week.
Yeah.
But that's what the basic terminology is defining. When we're looking at long-term services, those are the long-term services, and the intensity behind services are typically what yield the best results. But a long-term can generally be from about 1 to 3 years. Now, in Shannon, your case too, your son had services for 5 years for the intensive program, and then I'm sure he probably went through some transitionary period as a part of that. I've also had a lot of other cases who we have had kiddos who have had services with us for several years, beyond the 3 years. It's just that's the general idea. Keep in mind that ABA is considered an interim-based service, so it's not meant to be long-term. And in fact, we are not doing our families justice if we don't incorporate them into the training process to give you guys the tools necessary to continue programming without us. We can have a client who is very young and maybe works with us for 5 years, like Ted did. And then when they become a teenager, they're no longer in ABA services, but darn it, puberty hits, and we get all sorts of new fun behaviors. So part of our programming also incorporates giving you guys the tools to address those behaviors that might come up later, even after ABA has stopped. So I want you to bear that in mind. So when we're looking at making the recommendations now for starting to decrease the number of hours, we want to look at mastery criteria. We want to look at things like generalization. All of these are very important skills when we're coming to the determination of if we should be stopping an ABA program. We're never going to stop cold turkey. It's always going to be a process of slowly reducing the hours and going through that transition plan to make sure that there is appropriate transition from our care to the parents being able to take on the skill generalization and skill planning there. So when we're getting into that, we will include in our reports, and if you're a card client, then you can read it in the bottom of our reports during our recommendations section, but we usually say with the skills curriculum that we want 80% of the criteria met, for an example. Now, 80% is not all skills because it's not practical for us to have all of our skills. We're all still learning on a regular basis. What we're just trying to do in services is to close that skills gap. But there's still going to be ongoing learning. We want to help our children and adolescents and young adults with autism become better learners so that they can learn from their natural social environment. But that's not with the expectation that they're going to know absolutely everything. Because as Shannon said, she's still learning. I'm still learning. Those darn executive functioning skills that we all learn as adults, those are a little intense, and not everybody picks those up at some time. So for transitioning from a more intensive behavior program to a less intensive and looking at making that transition, we want to make sure that a good chunk of skills, at least the majority of skills, are acquired, that a better way of learning is acquired so that that skills gap that we worked so hard to close doesn't start opening up again. We also, though, want to be practical if we're seeing with the data that ABA is not working. I wholeheartedly believe in ABA. I love ABA. And we know from the research that ABA can work. But every so often, we are going to come across that client where we are just not seeing that we're making a clinically significant difference. And that might be one of those occasions, too, where we also have to look at transitioning because this model's not working for whatever reason. And as supervisors, we try very hard to work with your families and work with your kids to troubleshoot and be as effective as possible. But we also, again, rely heavily on that data, and the data makes all of our decisions for us.
What a wonderful, thorough answer. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the next one. Can a child with an over-average IQ still be diagnosed with autism? My child was diagnosed with autism at the age of 4. Now he's 10 years old, and a doctor would like to do an ADOS screening, but did mention that he probably wouldn't have the diagnosis anymore because of his IQ. He has every other symptom, severe anxiety, stimming, sensory issues, etc. What do you think, Hilary?
Okay, so what we want to look at when we're talking about an autism diagnosis is what is the current diagnostic criteria. And so given that your son was initially diagnosed when he was 4, he was probably diagnosed under it's called DSM-4, it's a Diagnostic and Statistics Manual. And so we now have DSM-5, so the criteria for diagnosing has changed slightly. But you have to think under DSM-4 that we have a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, for an example, which is typically that higher functioning individual. And we get some very smart individuals with autism, but they still get that autism diagnosis because IQ is not one of the factors in the diagnostic criteria for getting that autism diagnosis. So what we're looking what we're looking for the criteria right now under the current DSM is social communication and interaction deficits, repetitive patterns of behavior. Symptoms have to be present in early development. They have to cause significant impairment, and then this is the kind of the catch-all. They can't be better described by another DSM-5 diagnosis. So when the doctor is saying he wants to run an ADOS, that ADOS is meant as a screening tool to check on how severe the factors are, and it relates to the possibility of the individual having autism or not. Now, IQ, from my understanding of the ADOS, is not actually included in that. The only way that IQ is really included when it comes to autism is now in the new specifiers that we are doing, where we specify if it's with or without intellectual impairment. But that doesn't actually give an indicator on the diagnosis of autism. So as long as the other criteria are met, regardless of IQ, a person may or may not qualify for that autism diagnosis.
I love that. That was very thorough. So my concern for this parent is your child already has the diagnosis. I always want to know why people want to get a diagnosis, because the whole purpose for me of a diagnosis is that it gives you the ability to get services. So if the child is 4 and the doctor wants to do the ADOS, we do see kids who will have qualified at one point, but now they've made progress in a whole bunch of things, not the IQ, and they no longer qualify for the diagnosis as it is currently written. But so my question is, why? Like, if your child is still getting services, I would be a little bit cautious. That's my 2 cents. Because you need the diagnosis to be there in order to get those services in almost all cases. But anyway, I'm going to move on to the next question here, Hilary, which is what do I do if my parent wants to suppress? What do you do if a parent wants to suppress your stimming things that help you cope with situations? And my understanding is that this is a young person on the spectrum who wrote in and is dealing with this. So where are you on the suppressing of stimming?
So, stimming, what I want everyone to understand about stimming is that we all actually stim in some way usually. So you think about you're at a dinner and maybe it's kind of running a little bit long and you start tapping on the table, or maybe you start jiggling your foot underneath the table a little bit, or you're at work and you're in a meeting and you start twiddling your pen. All of those can be stemming behaviors. It's something that's meeting an internal need for us. Just because we have that behavior doesn't necessarily make it a problem behavior, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that needs to be reduced. When we're looking at it for a problem behavior needing to be reduced, we're looking at things like, is it impacting being able to interact with your social environment? Is it causing you to not learn additional skills because it's so distracting? Those kinds of things are considerations we take into whether or not it's a problem behavior. But just because stimming is happening doesn't mean it's a problem behavior that needs to be diminished. So my thought on this would be, it kind of depends on where your stance is on the stemming behavior, on if you think it's impacting your everyday life. From a parent's perspective, we want our kids to fit in. That's very important. And maybe we have some anxiety ourselves about the stemming behavior setting us apart from our social environment. There are different things you can do to still get that need met that makes it look a little bit more socially appropriate. But again, it doesn't necessarily need curbing. It just depends on the behavior itself. So I would recommend that you speak with your parents about that, about what concerns they have, and if it's a concern for you or if it's not a concern for you. Finding different ways to cope with that. It is important to learn coping strategies for a variety of reasons, and we all have to develop coping strategies of getting to an understanding with people who just don't like characteristics that we exhibit. Doesn't mean that we're wrong. It just means that we're different, and that applies to all of us. It's not just individuals with autism. We are all different in our own ways, but if it's something that's impacting our social environment, then having consideration of that other person's perspective and how we can match our environment, or if we just need to accept I'm just different in this way and that's okay too.
I love that answer. I am now your newest big fan, Hilary. You you exceeded all expectations, because I think this is a really important thing. We have a lot of self-advocates, self-described self-advocates who watch the show and are very hurt by the fact that the things that they are doing to cope with just life, that they feel that other people are constantly asking them not to do those things. And I love CARD's point of view on this, that stims are there for a reason, and that if everybody agrees that a stim is getting in the way of something that's meaningful, a goal that's meaningful, then a stim is never completely taken away, but parameters are put on it, or something new is put in a replacement behavior that fulfills the same need. And so I love the way you languaged all that, because I think it's respectful of the individual, which is what we should be doing always. So thank you for that. That was just truly awesome. And we thank you for we're gonna ask you to come back. You were fabulous.
I'm happy to. Thank you guys again so much for having me.
You have a great day.
Thank you. You guys as well. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Wasn't she awesome? Isn't it nice too to know that there are people like that out in the world? That I'm here at CARD and I meet a lot of people. I've not had the opportunity to spend a great deal of time with Hilary, and now I want to. Wasn't she fabulous? But every time I meet individuals like this, and I'm like, isn't it great that there are people like this out in the world who are helping our kids and helping our families? It just makes me very, very happy. All right, speaking of being happy, you're going to be happy with our next guest, because we're going to take a break, but then we're going to come back and talk to Julie Hornok from United in Autism. She's the founder of that nonprofit and also a prolific writer. She's a mom, and we're going to talk about what her particular point of view is, and she's going to tell us the 3 things that help distinguish those parents who become motivated and get positive and help their kids, and those parents that are in that dark hallway of, how did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Oh, woe is me, right? And we've all been there. We've all walked down that hallway a little bit. It's not the fun place to be. So she's going to talk with us about, the keys to being in that other hallway. So Julie Hornok from United in Autism after these messages. Stick with us.
Welcome to Smarty. This month, we're going to be making our own chore spin wheel. You'll notice while we make this fun activity, these icons are going to be popping up onto the screen. These correlate to specific skill sets that are in the Skills program. Skills is the ABA-based online tool that helps parents build their own teaching plan for children on the autism spectrum. If you are a Skills user, this will help you get the most out of this educational opportunity. Well, let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are a large bowl to trace, cardstock, scissors, a pencil, a ruler, a hole puncher, a metal brad, and any other arts and crafts materials you want to use to decorate your pinwheel with. So step 1, you're going to take your large bowl and place it on top of the cardstock and trace the circle. Step 2, you guessed it, you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut along the line. Step 3, you're going to fold the circle into quarters. This is the best way to make sure all the triangles within it are symmetrical. Once you folded the paper, you're going to take your ruler and you're going to trace those lines so you can actually see them on the circle. Now here comes the fun part. Take your arts and crafts materials and you're going to decorate the chore spin wheel. I used some crayons to color in every other quadrant so you could see them pop and see the difference between the different chores. Place the different adaptive skills your child is working on in the different quadrants. Once you're done decorating the circle and labeling the different chores in each quadrant, then you're going to take your scrap paper that you had left over and you're going to cut an arrow out of it. Once the arrow has been cut, you're going to take your hole puncher and hole punch on the very edge of it. This will be your spinner. Then you're going to take your arrow and your circle and line them up and take your brad and place it through and secure it. And voila, you have your finished chore spin wheel. Well, I enjoyed making this activity with you, and I hope to see you soon. Until next time, guys, craft on! To find more about Skills and to access all of the lessons you saw in today's Smarty, visit skillsforautism.com and click on the parents icon. Skills, the online autism solution.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We should have had the topic this week to be like super uber fabulous moms, because that's what our next guest is, and we have one tomorrow too. But joining us right now is Julie Hornok, and she is the founder of the nonprofit United in Autism. We are so excited to have her here with us. She's also a speaker. She is a wonderful interviewer of inspirational parents. She has the book United in Autism, in fact, out, and the subheading is Finding Strength Inside the Spectrum. The foreword is by Dr. Temple Grandin, and it is the compilation of a lot of interviews she did with inspirational parents. So but that just is scratching the surface of what Julie has done. She's an amazing parent. So Julie, thank you and welcome to Autism Live.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
And you're stunningly beautiful too. We're all intimidated now.
Oh my gosh. It's all in the lighting.
Okay, well, it's great lighting then. I'd like to have some of that, please. So Julie, you identify as a parent of someone who's on the spectrum?
Yes. I have a daughter who is now 16 years old, and her name is Lizzie, and she's just an incredible girl. I'm so blessed to be her mom.
Well, I got to tell you, I feel this kinship with you because I have the 16-year-old boy version of your daughter, although he's not a cheerleader. But I would sometime we have to get your daughter and my son together because I have a feeling they could change the world together. But Julie, talk a little bit about how United in Autism, the nonprofit, came about, and then we want to hear all about the book.
Absolutely. Well, when my daughter started doing better, I just had freed up energy. You know, as a mom, we work so hard, and then when we have free time, we don't know what to do with ourselves. And so I decided I wanted to put together what I didn't have whenever my daughter was young, which is a time for moms to get together and focus on their emotional health. And so through a local nonprofit in the Dallas area, I started putting together these events where we just bring everybody in a room, we just love on them, we share with each other, and there's such power to being in a room with like 100 autism moms, and we don't have to explain anything, we just show up exactly as we are, and we're loved and we're accepted. And not only that, the moms ended up meeting other moms that became their lifeline in the journey. And so I started to take this event across the country and bring it, and just like, we are asking nothing of you. We just want you to come, and we want you to focus on you for the first time ever, because you're so used to focusing on your kid. So that's what we started.
Wonderful, wonderful idea. And then how did that sort of lead you to writing the book, United in Autism, Finding Strength Inside the Spectrum?
So in the events, I had this desire, because we had this wonderful time together, and then it's like, oh, the next minute you're home and you're in the trenches, somebody's smearing poop on the walls, somebody's running around naked, and you're like, it's almost like it never happened. So I wanted to give them some inspirational stories of parents that were just rocking it in the midst of autism. Like, even if their kid did not necessarily get better, or even if they were in a third world country, like, there's parents that are inspirational that we can kind of look at and be like, okay, if they can do this, I can do this. And I couldn't find that book, so I just decided I was going to interview across the world, and I was going to write it.
What a wonderful thing, because I do think that one of the things that's most needed right now is for parents who are in the middle of this to hear from parents who've been through it and are still going through it, who are surviving and thriving. I absolutely think that's one of the most pivotal parts of this, is that as a community, we need to share our stories. So what a wonderful thing. Where can we get the book?
So either at unitedinautism.com or Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, really anywhere online that books are, it's there.
And for people, now you're based in the Dallas area, but for people who aren't in Dallas who want to attend one of these events that you do, how would they hear about those?
So they're up on my website. I actually have to update it for the fall, but they'll be up shortly, and they can come to that. And I have something on there where you can request, and as soon as we find funding for each area, I'll lay out the event, and we'll love on the moms that locally. And we always partner with a local charity, because we want to not just have them have a good time, we want to connect them with each other.
Wonderful. Well, I want to talk to you about having one in LA, but maybe in other places. So let's work that out. Okay. Now, one of the things I read in your and all of your materials is that you have identified 3 keys that separate the parents that go there's the parents that are the inspirational, going for it, and then the people who are down that long, dark hallway who have really succumbed to the stress and the woe is me and are stuck in that very disgruntled, why did this happen to me hallway. And I'm always very interested in that, because as a parent, I've been down both hallways, and I know for sure that being down the one where we're getting something done is more positive. So what are those 3 keys for parents who are watching, who are feeling like, yeah, no, I'm not liking this, and I'm bitter? about it.
Absolutely. I mean, we all know both sides. We see moms that take the hard things they've done and they're able to move forward and look like they're rocking it and just doing everything so great, even though everyone's going through hard times. But then there are the moms, like you said, that are just, it's like they can't get on top of it. They seem bitter. They seem angry at the world. And as I was interviewing these families across the world, I mean, I'm interviewing people in third world countries, and they have so much less than us here in the States. And I thought, this is just, we got to see through all the interviews if there's something that all of these inspirational parents have done to become inspirational or to be okay in it, to find peace. And so I did. I looked, and I'm like, throughout all the stories, there were 3 things. And so the 3 things are first, grieving. And I know grieving, it's like a hard thing to be like, oh, just grieve, but it has to come. And, you know, at the end of grieving is acceptance. And I think you talked about this earlier in the show, that when we accept our kids, I mean, oh my gosh, then the fun starts, because then we can enjoy them. And so there's the grieving that ends in acceptance. Community is the second thing. And a lot of the families I met, they couldn't find community, and there wasn't anything. And even there was a lady in Germany named Maria. She put an ad in the newspaper like every single day, because this is pre-internet, to find her community. So if we don't have our community, you need to go and find it, because there's such just peace and understanding in sharing what you're going through with someone else. It just makes it not as bad and not as lonely. And I know just from parents that reach out to me, the ones that are suffering the most are the ones that feel isolated. So however we need to do it, we need to find our people. And there's different kinds of autism groups. You find the one you connect with, the women you connect with, and that you can talk to. So there's the grieving, community, and the last thing is service. And I often have autism moms roll their eyes at me because they're like, I am so tired. And I'm like, I know, I was there. I lived that exhaustion. But if you just look in the midst of your normal day and you find something you can do nice for other people, it's amazing how much it'll lift your spirits. And even if you can look when you're sitting in like a therapy center and just talk to the other moms, because if you've been in this 5 minutes, then you have information someone else can use. And when we begin to give information to others and use what we learned through our hard times, it kind of comes full circle, and our pain now has purpose. And that's where you move forward in it, and now you're using what you had, the hardest things in your life, you're using to help others with it. And it just becomes this beautiful thing that it didn't happen for nothing, you know?
I couldn't agree more. And in my travels, the parents that I have run into that in the early days, I was looking for what are the situations that I want to look like down the road. 10 years from now, what do I want for our situation to look like? What do I want my relationship with my son to be like? What do I want my relationship with my husband to be like? What do I want my son's relationship with the world to be like? And all the examples that I saw were people who were doing all of the things that you're talking about. And I saw clearly, the parents have a big part in this. That if they're positive and if they're, I saw that the parents who were involved, and sometimes that's how they got their community. And I see these groups of people where, somebody will be going through a rough time, and I see how the group just envelops them. And that time goes easier when, in fact, there's more people to share it with. And I always say this on the show that sometimes you feel like you're the only person living on Mars. And when you find out that you're not, it makes it better. It makes it easier. You go, oh, okay, it's not just me. There are other people that are going through this, and look, they're okay. So how did they get okay? And following in their snowshoe prints, right? I just love your attitude towards things. We want to encourage people. The book is United in Autism, Finding Strength Inside the Spectrum. And basically, you were saying, Julie, that they can get it any place where they're selling books. But tell us your website again so people can go there and find out more about your event.
UnitedInAutism.com.
Wonderful. And so what's next for you? What's the next thing that you've got cooking? Because you're a mover and shaker.
Oh man, yeah, I can't sit still. So we are doing more moms events in the fall, and then also we are working on, I was very touched specifically by the story of the woman in Ethiopia, and I cried for 3 days after I met with her, and I couldn't take that they have no information over there. And so I put together a team, some of the people on my board for United Autism, and we are pulling together educational videos, and we are going to bring it and we're going to start doing updates and allowing them to get the knowledge that they need. So we're going to help educate that area, and then we hope to expand it to other parts of Africa. So I'm really excited about that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we thank you for taking the time to be here, and we thank you for all your service to our community. And I am going to connect with you. Let's do one of those events in Los Angeles.
I would love it. I would absolutely love it.
That'll be great fun. All right. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So again, you guys, the book is United in Autism, Finding Strength Inside the Spectrum, and a series of interviews with very inspirational parents, guaranteed to really uplift your spirit and make you understand that all things are possible, right? Which, that's what we need. It isn't, we say here on the show, we always want to give you information and inspiration, because we could bury you in information, but every once in a while you got to get inspired, right? Otherwise you can't use the information. So we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to be back to close out the show. Stick with us. Or maybe we aren't. Maybe we're staying. Maybe we're staying for a mindfulness moment. All right, we're staying. We're staying for a mind. Traven said no. And Traven is the boss. So let's take just a moment then, because on Thursdays I love to talk about the mindfulness piece of this, because just like Julie was saying, it's so hard for the caretakers, especially, I'm going to say this, men seem to get very in action of something that they can do. Often they get involved in work. And they're like, I'm going to work as hard as I can, right? Women are like, I'm going to, really tackle this autism thing. But in both cases, it means that the needs of that individual sometimes get moved to the back, way to the back of the line, right? And mindfulness helps us for just 3 seconds or 3 minutes to take care of ourselves. Super duper important, right? So that piece of taking, even if it's just 3 breaths, I know I constantly harp on this, but especially because we had another incident recently of a parent who got into a car and got into an accident within a minute of driving away because she was upset. And we have all been down this path, right? So even if you only do this and build it into your schedule so that you get in, you click your seatbelt, and that is when you stop and take 3 breaths. If you will just do that, I think you will find that the driving process is easier, more efficient, and safer. And you might find that then you want to find, where else can I take 3 seconds for a breath? Build it into something so it's paired with something. So maybe you take your restroom break and you are there in your own personal little world for a second, in your stall or in your home or wherever, and that you just pause to take 3 deep exhales, 3 deep inhales. Maybe it's right when you sit down at the table, right before you take your first bite. Maybe it's when you lay down at night in bed before, the light is out, before you do anything else, not roll over, and, start to go through the day, whatever, 3 deep inhales. But especially whenever you get into a car and you're going to drive yourself or anyone else in the car, 3 breaths. An amazing way to be able to center yourself. And of course, I encourage you, we're all working this year to build on those 3 breaths into getting to 10 minutes, getting to 30 minutes, and then I'm told there is the promised land if we can get to an hour. I'm not at an hour, just keeping it real, but I'm working towards it. Someday I'm going to be able to be relaxed and not focusing on anything in particular, just being and breathing awake for an hour. I'm pledging that. I'm told that when I can get there, I will be a happier, healthier person. And I believe that because the statistics are there. So I'm working towards it. Work there with me, but let's start with the 3 breaths. I think you'll find that you will be safer. Hey, I've got to go over some of the things from the rest of the week, but of course I've already moved them. Why do I do this to myself, Draven? Draven gives this to me now. I have to tell you about tomorrow's show. Tomorrow on the show, we have Alana Gershlovitz, who is the author of that book, Saving My Son. Amazing. Coming to us from South Africa. Ooh, you're going to love her interview. If it doesn't give you chills, I don't know what wouldn't. And then Vince Redmond, licensed marriage and family therapist, is going to talk with us about when do you know when you're pushing too hard with your child, and when are you holding your child back because you're afraid of pushing too far. I mean, it's a fine line, right? So Vince is going to talk with us about how do we tell the difference, and how do we do with our feelings when we really are about wanting to keep our children safe and happy and not upset, but we want them to make progress and become independent. How do we negotiate those 2 things, because it's super duper tough? I think we're out of time. Is that true, Traven? We're out of time. We have to go. But we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.